500 fathoms. At this rate, if all goes well and if that depression from the south doesn't interfere, we should see St. John's, if visible and not covered in fog as it usually is, about midnight tomorrow, July the 3rd. 6:55 p.m. Wireless message from Air Ministry via Clifton states, conditions unchanged in British Isles. Anticyclone persistent in eastern Atlantic, a new depression entering Atlantic from south. This confirms Harris's forecast and is an admirable proof of the value of cloud forecasting. Sea and sky invisible 7 p.m. The clouds have risen to our height and we are now driving away through them with no signs of the sky above or the sea underneath. Scott reckons the wind is northeast by east and helping us slightly. Airship now very heavy owing to change in temperature and 12 degrees down by the stern. Running on all 5 engines at 1,600 revolutions, height 3,000 feet. 8 p.m. We are just on top of the clouds, alternately in the sun and then plunging through thick banks of clouds. The sun is very low down on the western horizon and we are steering straight for it, making Pritchard at the elevators curse himself for not having brought tinted glasses. Ship now on an even keel. 8:30 p.m. Scott decided to go down underneath the clouds and increase his speed on all engines to 1,800 revolutions to do so. Dark, cold, and wet in the clouds, and we shut all windows. See 1,500 feet below we see the sea at 1,500 feet between patches of cloud. Rather bumpy. We now find ourselves between 2 layers of clouds, the top layer 1,000 feet above us and the lower layer 500 feet below, with occasional glimpses of sea. The sun is now setting and gradually disappears below the lower cloud horizon, throwing a wonderful pink glow on the white clouds in every direction. Course steered, 320 degrees. Course made good, 299 degrees. Airspeed, 44 knots, speed made good, 55 miles per hour. All through this first night in the Atlantic the ordinary airship routine of navigating, steering, and elevating, also maintaining the engines in smooth running order, goes, watch and watch, as in the daytime. The night is very dark. The airship, however, is lighted throughout, a much enlarged lighting system having been fitted. All instruments can be individually illuminated as required, and in case of failure at the lighting system all figures and indicators are radiumized. Lights not needed. The radium paint used is so luminous that in most cases the lighting installation is unnecessary. 8:20 am, Thursday, July 3. The clock has been put back another hour to correct our time to Greenwich Mean Time. Position, longitude 35 degrees 60 minutes west, latitude 53 degrees north. Cook got position by observation on sun and a good cloud horizon, and considers it accurate to within 30 and 40 miles. Our position is over the westbound steamship route from Cape Race to the Clyde and momentarily crossing the eastbound route from Belle Isle to Plymouth. We are well over halfway between Ireland and Newfoundland and are back again on the Great Circle route, having been slightly to the south of it, owing to the drift effect of a northerly wind. Good weather report from St. John's. Speaks to steamship 12:45 p.m. Durant is speaking SS Canada on our Spark wireless set, so there may be a chance of our seeing her shortly, as the sea is temporarily visible. The second wireless operator obtains his direction on our directional wireless so that we may know in what direction to look for her. All we know at the moment is that she is somewhere within 120 miles. Captain David, in command, wishes us a safe voyage. We gaze through our glasses in her direction, but she is just over the horizon. 2 p.m. Slight trouble with starboard amidships engine, cracked cylinders, water jacket. Shotter, always equal to the occasion, made a quick and safe repair with a piece of copper sheeting, and the entire supply of the ship's chewing gum had to be chewed by himself and 2 engineers before being applied. 4:30 p.m. We are now on the Canadian summer route of steamers bound for the St. Lawrence via Belle Isle Strait and over the well-known Labrador Current. There are already indications of these cold currents in the fog which hangs immediately above the surface of the water. Harris hurt, not seriously. Scott and Cook spend much time at chart table with protractors, dividers, stopwatches, and many navigational textbooks, measuring angles of drift and calculating course made good. Aerial navigation is more complicated than navigation on the surface of the sea, but there is no reason why when we know more about the air and its peculiarities it should not be made just as accurate. 5:00 p.m. Harris unwisely shuts his hand on door of wireless cabin, painful but not serious. Flow of language not audible to me, as the forward engine happened to be running. 6 to 7 p.m. We are gradually getting farther and farther into the shallow depression which was reported yesterday coming up from the South Atlantic. For the last 4 hours the sea has been rising and now the wind is south-southeast, 4 to 5 miles an hour. Visibility only a half mile. Very rough sea and torrents of rain. In spite of this the ship is remarkably steady. Climbs through depression at 8 p.m. Scott decides to climb right through it, and we evidently came out over the top of it at 3,400 feet. 8:30 p.m. We have now passed the center of the depression, exactly as Harris foretold. The rain has ceased and we are traveling quite smoothly again. To the west the clouds have lifted and we see some extraordinarily interesting sky, black, angry clouds giving place to clouds of a grey mouse color, then a bright salmon pink clear sky, changing lower down the horizon to darker clouds with a rich golden lining as the sun sinks below the surface. The sea is not visible, and is covered by a fluffy grey featherbed of clouds, slightly undulating and extending as far as the eye can reach. The moon is just breaking through the black clouds immediately above it. On the east we see the black, ominous depression from which we have just emerged, while away more to the south the cloud bed over which we are passing seems to end suddenly and merge into the horizon. Valuable meteorological data. We are getting some valuable meteorological data on this flight without a doubt, and each fresh phenomenon as it appears is instantly explained by the ever-alert Harris, who has a profound knowledge of his subject. 9 p.m. One of the engineers has reported sick, complains of feverishness. A stowaway has just been discovered, a cat smuggled on board by one of the crew for luck. It is a very remarkable fact that nearly every member of the crew has a mascot of some description, from the engineer officer, who wears one of his wife's silk stockings as a muffler around his neck, to Major Scott, the captain, with a small gold charm called Thumbs Up. We have 2 carrier pigeons on board, which it has been decided not to use. Anyway, whether we release them or not, they can claim to be the first 2 pigeons to fly the Atlantic. Sunrise 4:30 am, Friday, July 4, wonderful sunrise, the different colors being the softest imaginable, just like a wash drawing. 7 a.m. Height, 1,000 feet. Bright, blue sky above, thin fog partly obscuring the sea beneath us, sea moderate, big swell. The fog bank appears to end abruptly 10 miles or so away toward the south, where the sea appears to be clear of fog and a very deep blue. Standing out conspicuously in this blue patch of sea we see an enormous white iceberg. The sun is shining brightly on its steep sides, and we estimate it as roughly 300 yards square and 150 feet high. As these icebergs usually draw about 6 times as much water as their height, we wondered whether she was aground, as the depth of water at that point is only about 150 fathoms. Another big iceberg can just be seen in the dim distance. These are the only 2 objects of any kind, sort, or description we have as yet seen on this journey. 8:15 am. Over large ice field, fog still clinging to the surface of the water. Water evidently must be very cold. Extraordinary crimpy, wave-like appearance of clouds rolling up from the north underneath it. Harris has never seen this before. Pritchard took photograph. On port beam there is a long stretch of clear blue sea sandwiched in between wide expanses of fog on either side, looking just like a blue river flowing between 2 wide snow-covered banks. Cause, a warm current of water which prevents cloud from hanging over it. This well illustrated the rule that over cold currents of water the clouds will cling to the surface. 9 a.m. We are now over a large ice field and the sea is full of enormous pieces of ice, small bergs in themselves. The ice is blue-green underwater, with frozen snow on top. A message reaches us from the Governor of Newfoundland. To General Maitland, officers and crew, R34, on behalf of Newfoundland I greet you as you pass us on your enterprising journey. Harris, Governor. Replied to as follows: to Governor of Newfoundland, Major Scott, officers and crew, R34, send grateful thanks for kind message with which I beg to associate myself. General Maitland. 12:50 p.m. Land sighted by Scott. Land in sight. First spotted by Scott on starboard beam. a few small rocky islands visible for a minute or two through the clouds and instantly swallowed up again. Altered course southwest to have a closer look at them. Eventually made them out to be the northwest coastline of Trinity Bay, Newfoundland. Our time from Rathlin Island, the last piece of land we crossed above the north coast of Ireland, to north coast of Trinity Bay, Newfoundland, is exactly 59 hours. We are crossing Newfoundland at 1,500 feet in thick fog, which gradually clears as we get farther inland. A very rocky country with large forests and lakes, and for the most part no traces of habitation anywhere. Message from Street Johns to say that Raynham was up in his machine to greet us. We replied, giving our position. 3 p.m. Again enveloped in dense fog. Message from HMS Sentinel giving us our position. We are making good 38 or 40 knots and heading for Fortune Harbour. French flag dipped 4:30 p.m. We have passed out of Fortune Harbour, with its magnificent scenery and azure blue sea dotted with little white sailing ships, and are now over the two French islands, Miquelon and Saint Pierre, and steering a course for Halifax, Nova Scotia. The French flag was flying at Saint Pierre and was duly dipped as we passed over. 7:15 p.m. Passed over Tramp SS Seal bound for Sydney, Nova Scotia, from Street Johns, the first we have seen. 8:15 p.m. Clear weather. Sea moderate. Making good 30 miles per hour on 3 engines. Northern point of Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, just coming into sight. Lighthouse 4 flashes. We should make Halifax 2:30 am tomorrow. Saturday, July the 5th, 2:30 am. Very dark, clear night. Lights of Whitehaven show up brightly on our starboard beam and we make out the lights of a steamer passing us to the east. Strong headwind against us. Making no appreciable headway. Lansdowne asks for destroyer Lieutenant Commander Lansdowne, United States Naval Airship Service, sends signal on behalf of R-34 to United States authorities at Washington and Boston to send destroyer to take us in tow in case we should run out of petrol during the night. The idea is we would then be towed by the destroyer during the hours of darkness, and at dawn cast off and fly to Long Island under our own power. Let us hope this won't be necessary. It is now raining and foggy, which is the kind of weather that suits us now, as rain generally means no wind. 3 p.m. Past Haute Island in Fundy Bay. 3:30 p.m. For some little while past there had been distinct evidences of electrical disturbances. Atmospherics became very bad and a severe thunderstorm was seen over the Canadian coast, moving south down the coast. Scott turned east off his course to dodge the storm, putting on all engines. In this, fortunately for us, he was successful, and we passed through the outer edge of it. We had a very bad time, indeed, and it is quite the worst experience from a weather point of view that any of us have yet experienced in the air. Wonderful clouds photographed during the storm. Some wonderful specimens of cumulomammatus were seen and photographed. These clouds always indicate a very highly perturbed state of atmosphere and look rather like a bunch of grapes. The clouds drooped into small festoons. 7:30 p.m. We are now in clear weather again and have left Nova Scotia well behind us and are heading straight for New York. Particularly fine electrical disturbance type of sunset. 9:30 p.m. Another thunderstorm. Again we have to change our course to avoid it, and as every gallon of petrol is worth its weight in gold, it almost breaks our hearts to have to lengthen the distance to get clear of these storms. July the 6th, Sunday, 4 a.m. Sighted American soil at Chatham. 4:25 am. South end of Mahoney Island. Scott is wondering whether petrol will allow him to go to New York or whether it would not be more prudent to land at Montauk. 5:30 am. Passing over Martha's Vineyard, a lovely island and beautifully wooded. Scott decided he could just get through to our landing field at Hazelhurst Field, but that there would not be enough petrol to fly over New York. Very sad, but no alternative. We will fly over New York on start of our return journey on Tuesday night, weather and circumstances permitting. Landed 1:54 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, or 9:54 am US Summer Time, at Hazelhurst Field, Long Island. Total time on entire voyage, 108 hours, 12 minutes. Appendix I. United States Aircraft and Engine Production for the United States Air Service. The best rapid survey of the organization of the United States Air Service and the part which it played in the Great War, as well as statistics touching upon the materials used in aircraft production, the number of planes and engines made, and also the number of machines used for training purposes, and actually put into service at the front, is contained in the following extracts from the reports of Secretary Baker, Justice Charles E. Hughes, General Pershing, and Major General William L. Kenly. Secretary Baker's Air Service Report in his Annual Report for 1918, released December 5. The Secretary of War reported on the Air Service as follows: Air Service Organization. The aviation section of the Signal Corps, which had charge of the production and operation of military aircraft at the outbreak of the war, was created on the 18th of July, 1914. To assist in outlining America's aviation program, the Aircraft Production Board was appointed by the Council of National Defense in May, 1917. In October, 1917, the Aircraft Board, acting in an advisory capacity to the Signal Corps and the Navy, was created by Act of Congress. In April, 1918, the aviation section of the Signal Corps was separated into two distinct departments, Mr. John D. Ryan being placed in charge of aircraft production and Brig Gen. W. L. Kenly in charge of military aeronautics. Under the powers granted in the Overman Bill, a further reorganization was effected by presidential order in May, 1918, whereby aircraft production and military aeronautics were completely divorced from the Signal Corps and established in separate bureaus. This arrangement continued until August, when the present Air Service, under Mr. Ryan as Second Assistant Secretary of War, was established, combining under one head the administration of aviation personnel and equipment. Raw materials secured. One of the most important problems which confronted the aircraft organization from the start was the obtaining of sufficient spruce and fir for ourselves and our allies. To facilitate the work, battalions were organized under military discipline and placed in the forests of the western coast. A government plant and kiln were erected to cut and dry lumber before shipment, thus saving valuable freight space. To the 11th of November, 1918, the date the armistice was signed, the total quantity of spruce and fir shipped amounted to approximately 174 million feet, of which more than two-thirds went to the Allies. The shortage of linen stimulated the search for a substitute possessing the qualities necessary in fabric used for covering aeroplane wings. Extensive experiments were made with a cotton product which proved so successful that it is now used for all types of training and service planes. To meet the extensive demands for a high-grade lubricating oil, castor beans were imported from India and a large acreage planted in this country. Meanwhile, research work with mineral oils was carried on intensively, with the result that a lubricant was developed which proved satisfactory in practically every type of aeroplane motor, except the rotary motor, in which castor oil is still preferred. Production of training planes and engines. When war was declared, the United States possessed less than 300 training planes, all of inferior types. Deliveries of improved models were begun as early as June 1917. Up to the 11th of November 1918, over 5,300 had been produced, including 1,600 of a type which was temporarily abandoned on account of unsatisfactory engines. Planes for advanced training purposes were produced in quantity early in 1918. Up to the signing of the armistice, about 2,500 were delivered. Approximately the same number was purchased overseas for training the units with the Expeditionary Force. Several new models, to be used for training pursuit pilots, are under development. Within 3 months after the declaration of war, extensive orders were placed for 2 types of elementary training engines. Quantity production was reached within a short time. In all, about 10,500 have been delivered, sufficient to constitute a satisfactory reserve for some time to come. Of the advanced training engines, the 3 important models were of foreign design, and the success achieved in securing quantity production is a gratifying commentary on the manufacturing ability of this country. The total production up to the 11th of November was approximately 5,200. Production of service planes. The experience acquired during the operations on the Mexican border demonstrated the unsuitability of the planes then used by the American Army. Shortly after the declaration of war, a commission was sent abroad to select types of foreign service planes to be put into production in this country. we were confronted with the necessity of redesigning these models to take the Liberty motor, as foreign engine production was insufficient to meet the great demands of the Allies. The first successful type of plane to come into quantity production was a modification of the British de Havilland IV, an observation and day bombing plane. The first deliveries were made in February 1918. In May, production began to increase rapidly, and by October a monthly output of 1,200 had been reached. Approximately 1,900 were shipped to the Expeditionary Force prior to the termination of hostilities. The Handley Page night bomber, used extensively by the British, was redesigned to take 2 Liberty motors. Parts for approximately 100 planes have been shipped to England for assembly. Table 20 shows the status of American production of service planes by quarterly periods. Table 20. Service planes produced in the United States in 1918. Name of plane Jan. 31 to March 31 April 1 to June 30 July 1 to September 30 October 1 to November 8 Total de Havilland 4145,1651, 4933,187 Handley Page 1001101 a total of 2,676 pursuit, observation, and day bombing planes, with spare engines, were delivered to the Expeditionary Force by the French government for the equipment of our forces overseas. Considerable progress was made in the adaptation of other types of foreign planes to the American-made engines, and in the development of new designs. The US D-9AM, embodying some improvements over the de Havilland IV, was expected to come into quantity production in the near future. The Bristol Fighter, a British plane, was redesigned to take the Liberty 8 and the Hispano-Suiza 300 HP engines. A force of Italian engineers and skilled workmen was brought to America to redesign the Caproni night bomber to take 3 Liberty motors, and successful trial flights of this machine have been made. Several new models are under experimentation. Chief of these is the Le Perrier 2-seater fighter, designed around the Liberty motor, the performance of which is highly satisfactory. Several of these planes were sent overseas to be tested at the front. Production of service engines in view of the rapid progress in military aeronautics, the necessity for the development of a high-powered motor adaptable to American methods of quantity production was early recognized. The result of the efforts to meet this need was the Liberty motor, America's chief contribution to aviation, and one of the great achievements of the war. After this motor emerged from the experimental stage, production increased with great rapidity, the October output reaching 4,200, or nearly 1/3 of the total production up to the signing of the armistice. The factories engaged in the manufacture of this motor, and their total production to November 8, are listed in Table 21. Table 21. Production of Liberty motor to the 8th of November 1918, by factories. Packard Motor Car Company 4,654, Lincoln Motor Corporation 3,720, Ford Motor Corporation 3,025, General Motors Corporation 1,554, Nordyke and Marmon Company 433. Total 13,386. Of this total, 9,834 were high compression, or Army type, and 3,572 low compression, or Navy type, the latter being used in seaplanes and large night bombers. In addition to those installed in planes, about 3,500 Liberty engines were shipped overseas, to be used as spares and for delivery to the Allies. Other types of service engines, including the Hispano-Suiza 300 HP, the Bugatti, and the Liberty 8-cylinder, were under development when hostilities ceased. The Hispano-Suiza 180 HP had already reached quantity production. Nearly 500 engines of this type were produced, about half of which were shipped to France and England for use in foreign-built pursuit planes. Table 22 gives a resume of the production of service engines by quarterly periods. Table 22. Production of service engines in 1918. Name of engine: Jan. 1 to March 31, April 1 to June 30, July 1 to September 30, October 1 to November 8. Total: Liberty 12, Army 1,221, 4,934, 1,164, 0939, 824. Liberty 12, Navy 1426331, 7101, 0873, 572. Hispano-Suiza 180 HP, 185284469. Improvement in instruments and accessories. Few facilities existed for the manufacture of many of the delicate instruments and intricate mechanisms going into the equipment of every battle plane. The courage and determination with which these most difficult problems were met and solved will form one of the bright pages in the archives of American industry. One of the most important outgrowths of the research work which the war stimulated was the development of voice command information flying by means of wireless devices. The great significance of this invention will be appreciated when it is realized that the leader of a formation has heretofore been dependent on signals for conveying instructions to the individual units of the squadron. Training of personnel. After the declaration of war, the construction of training fields proceeded with such rapidity that the demand for training equipment greatly exceeded the output. Since the latter part of 1917, however, the supply of elementary training planes and engines has been more than sufficient to meet the demands, while the situation as regards certain types of planes for advanced training has greatly improved. Approximately 17,000 cadets were graduated from ground schools, 8,602 reserve military aviators were graduated from elementary training schools, and 4,028 aviators completed the course in advanced training provided in this country. Pending the provision of adequate equipment for specialized advanced training, the policy was adopted of sending students overseas for a short finishing course before going into action. The shortage of skilled mechanics with sufficient knowledge of aeroplanes and motors was met by the establishment of training schools from which over 14,000 mechanics were graduated. At the cessation of hostilities, there were in training as aviators in the United States 6,528 men, of whom 22% were in ground schools, 37% in elementary schools, and 41% in advanced training schools. The number of men in training as aviator mechanics was 2,154. Forces at the front. Early in 1918, the first squadrons composed of American personnel provided with French planes appeared at the front. The number was increased as rapidly as equipment could be obtained. On the 30th of September, the date of the latest available information, there were 32 squadrons at the front. Of these 15 were pursuit, 13 observation, and 4 bombing. The first squadron equipped with American planes reached the front in the latter part of July. Losses in battle and in training. Though the casualties in the Air Force were small as compared with the total strength, the casualty rate of the flying personnel at the front was somewhat above the artillery and infantry rates. The reported battle fatalities up to the 24th of October were 128 and accident fatalities overseas 244. The results of Allied and American experience at the front indicate that 2 aviators lose their lives in accidents for each aviator killed in battle. The fatalities at training fields in the United States to the 24th of October were 262. A later official report gave the total U.S. aviators lost in combat as 171, and those killed by accident as 554. Commissioned and enlisted strength. On America's entrance into the war, the personnel of the Air Service consisted of 65 officers and 1,120 men. When the armistice was signed, the total strength was slightly over 190,000, comprising about 20,000 commissioned officers, over 6,000 cadets under training, and 164,000 enlisted men. In addition to the cadets under training, the flying personnel was composed of about 11,000 officers, of whom approximately 42% were with the expeditionary force when hostilities ceased. The Air Service constituted slightly over 5% of the total strength of the Army. General Pershing's report. Secretary Baker's report included a communication received from General Pershing in which he commented on aircraft and the Air Service as follows: "Our entry into the war found us with few of the auxiliaries necessary for its conduct in the modern sense. Among our most important deficiencies in material were artillery, aviation, and tanks. In order to meet our requirements as rapidly as possible, we accepted the offer of the French government to provide us with the necessary artillery equipment. In aviation we were in the same situation, and here again the French government came to our aid until our own aviation program should be underway. We obtained from the French the necessary planes for training our personnel, and they have provided us with a total of 2,676 pursuit, observation, and bombing planes. The first aeroplanes received from home arrived in May, and altogether we have received 1,379. The first American squadron completely equipped by American production, including aeroplanes, crossed the German lines on the 7th of August, 1918. It should be fully realized that the French government has always taken a most liberal attitude and has been most anxious to give us every possible assistance in meeting our deficiencies in these as well as in other respects. Our dependence upon France for artillery, aviation, and tanks was, of course, due to the fact that our industries had not been exclusively devoted to military production. All credit is due our own manufacturers for their efforts to meet our requirements, as at the time the armistice was signed we were able to look forward to the early supply of practically all our necessities from our own factories. The Hughes report. The committee appointed by the President to investigate the charges of misappropriation of funds reported in November 1918, on the number of training planes and engines built. Justice Chas. E. Hughes was chairman of the committee. Aeroplanes and engines delivered during fiscal year ending 30 June, 1918. The reported deliveries of aeroplanes and engines made prior to 30 June, 1918, are as follows. Aeroplanes elementary training planes JN4D 2972 SJ 11600 4,572 advanced training planes JN4H training 402 gunnery 321 JN6HB 100 S4B 100 S4C 73 Penguin 50 1,046 combat and bombing planes DH-4 529 Bristol Fighter 24, 553, total planes 6,171 engines elementary training OX 5474, A 7 A 2188, 7,662 advanced training Hispano 150 HP 2,188 Gnome 100 209 Lerone 80 68 Lawrence 28 114 2,579 combat and bombing US 12-cylinder, Army type, 1,615 US 12-cylinder, Navy type, 775 Hispano 300 H2P, 2,392 total engines equals 12,633 number of machines at the front. Report prepared by Statistics Branch, General Staff, War Department, the 22nd of March, 1919. Concerning the 628 de Havilland 4 planes put in service at front before armistice. The following table and diagram shows the status of production, shipments and use overseas of de Havilland 4 service planes at the date of the armistice. Number % of total production produced 3,227,100 floated 1,88558 received at French ports. A. 1,18537 assembled overseas 1,02532 put into service overseas 98330 put into service at front 62819 in commission at front, B 45714, A to the 1st of November 1918, B the 3rd of November 1918. Value of contracts cancelled and suspended exceed $480 million. The following is a summary of the value of cancellations and suspensions of contracts to the 19th of March 1919. Value percent of total engines and spare parts $250,409,98252 airplanes and spare parts 167,554,38635 chemicals and chemical plants 19,852,3704 instruments and accessories 13,832 2,9023 balloons and supplies 10,071,0352 fabrics, lumber and metals 7,968,3242 miscellaneous 11,041,1322. Total $480,730,131 The 64 American Aces. The following official list gives the status of the 64 American Aces, that is, aviators who had each downed 5 or more enemies by the time hostilities ceased. Captain Edward V. Rickenbacker of Columbus, Ohio, famous as an automobile driver, was the premier ace of the American Air Force in France, having 26 enemy planes to his credit. First Lieutenant Frank Luke, Jr., of Phoenix, Illinois, who was killed in action the 19th of May 1918, was second on the list of aces with 18 victories to his credit. And Major Victor Raoul Lufbery of Wallingford, Conn, also killed in action the 19th of May 1918, was third, with 17 victories. Before joining the American Army, Major Lufbery was a member of the Lafayette Escadrille. Captain Reed G. Landis of Chicago, son of Judge Landis, and First Lieutenant David E. Putnam, of Brookline, Mass., who was killed in action, had 12 victories each. The other aces with the number of victories credited to each follow: First Lieutenant Fields Kindly, Gray Vet, Arc. 10. First Lieutenant G. Vaughan, Jr., 341 Washington Avenue, Brooklyn, 10. First Lieutenant J. M. Swab, Philadelphia, 10. First Lieutenant T. G. Cassady, 9. First Lieutenant C. E. Wright, Cambridge, Mass., 9. First Lieutenant W. P. Irwin, Chicago, 9. Captain E. W. Springs, Lancaster, Penn, 9. First Lieutenant H. R. Clay, Jr., Fort Worth, Texas, 8. Major J. M. Eisner, 45 Lenox Road, Brooklyn, NY, 8. Captain Hamilton Coolidge, deceased, Boston, Mass., 8. Captain G. de F. Lana, Washington, D.C., 8. First Lieutenant P. F. Barra, Fort Wayne, Ind., 8. Captured the 22nd of May 1918. First Lieutenant F. O. D. Hunter, Savannah, Go, 8. First Lieutenant W. W. White, 541 Lexington Avenue, New York City, 8. Second Lieutenant Clinton Jones, San Francisco, Cal, 8. Captain R. M. Chambers, Memphis, 10, 7. First Lieutenant Harvey Cook, Toledo, Ohio, 7. First Lieutenant L. C. Holden, 103 Park Avenue, New York City, 7. First Lieutenant K. H. Chan, deceased, Indianapolis, Ind., 7. First Lieutenant W. A. Robertson, Fort Smith, Ark, 7. First Lieutenant L. J. Rummel, 798 South 11th Street, Newark, NJ, 7. First Lieutenant Ella Hamilton, deceased, Burlington, VT, or Peatsfield, Mass., 7. First Lieutenant J. O. Creech, Washington, D.C., 6. Second Lieutenant Howard Burdick, 175 Remsen Street, Brooklyn, NY, 6. First Lieutenant C. L. Bissell, Kane, Penn, 6. Major H. E. Hartney, Saskatoon, Canada, 6. Captain Douglas Campbell, Mount Hamilton, Cal, 6. Captain J. C. Vasconcelos, Denver, Colonel, 6. Captain E. G. Tobin, San Antonio, Texas, 6. First Lieutenant E. P. Curtis, Rochester, NY, 6. First Lieutenant Sumner Sewell, no address, 6. First Lieutenant R. O'Neill, no Gales, Eyes, 6. First Lieutenant Donald Hudson, Kansas City, Mo, 6. First Lieutenant M. K. Guthrie, Mobile, Ayla, 6. First Lieutenant W. H. Stovall, Stovall, Miss, 6. First Lieutenant J. D. Bean, missing in action, 6. First Lieutenant A. R. Brooks, Framingham, Mass., 6. First Lieutenant R. O. Lindsay, Madison, NC, 6. First Lieutenant Martinus Stenseth, Twin City, Min., 6. Second Lieutenant F. K. Hayes, Chicago, Ill., 6. First Lieutenant H. C. Klotz, no address, 5. Lieutenant Colonel William Thor, Pittsburgh, Penn, 5. Major D. M. C. K. Peterson, Honesdale, Penn, 5. Captain H. R. Buckley, Agawam, Mass., 5. Major C. J. Biddle, Philadelphia, Penn, 5. First Lieutenant James Knowles, Cambridge, Mass., 5. First Lieutenant J. A. Healy, Jersey City, NJ, 5. First Lieutenant Innes Potter, no address, 5. First Lieutenant F. M. Simmons, 20 West 8th Street, New York City, 5. First Lieutenant J. F. Winner, deceased, 124 East 28th Street, New York, 5. First Lieutenant J. J. Sorelli, Chicago, 5. First Lieutenant E. M. Haight, Astoria, NY, 5. First Lieutenant H. H. George, Niagara Falls, NY, 5. First Lieutenant G. W. Furlow, Rochester, Min., 5. First Lieutenant E. Estabrook, Fort Flagler, Wash, 5. First Lieutenant B. V. Borkham, Milford, Texas, 5. Second Lieutenant Harold MacArthur, no address, 5. Second Lieutenant J. S. Owens, Baltimore, 5. Second Lieutenant J. O. Donaldson, Washington, D.C., 5. Other Americans who are credited with bringing down one or more planes: Lieutenant Frank L. Bayliss, New Bedford, Mass. Killed 20 June 1918, in the British Air Service, 12. Adjutant E. C. Parsons, Springfield, Mass. 4. Lieutenant H. Clay Ferguson, wounded 12 March 1918, 4. Captain J. Norman Hall, Lafayette Escadrille under E.F. Colfax, IA, wounded and captured 7 May 1918, 4. Lieutenant Joseph C. Stlin, Lafayette Escadrille, Brooklyn, NY, 3. Lieutenant Norman Prince, organizer of Lafayette Escadrille, Beverly Farms, Mass., killed 15 October 1916, 3. Lieutenant Kiffin Yates Rockwell, Lafayette Escadrille, Asheville, NC, killed 23 September 1916, 4. Lieutenant Walter Renault, Martha's Vineyard, Mass., 3. Lieutenant Walter Lovell, Lafayette Escadrille, Concord, Mass., 3. Lieutenant Thomas Hitchcock, Jr., Lafayette Escadrille, Roslyn, NY, captured 10 March 1918. He escaped later. 3. Lieutenant Bert Hall, Lafayette Escadrille, Bowling Green, KY, retired December 1916, 3. George Turner, Lenox, Mass., 3rd on 17 July 1918, 3. Lieutenant Hugh Duggan, Chicago, Royal Flying Corps, captured 6 April 1918, 2. Lieutenant G. de Freest Lana, Washington, D.C., 2. Lieutenant Andrew C. Campbell, Chicago, missing, 2. Captain Phelps Collins, Detroit, killed 18 March 1918, 2. Lieutenant Didier Masson, New York, Lafayette Escadrille, 2. Christopher Ford, New York, 2. Lieutenant W. A. Wellman, Cambridge, Mass., 2. Sergeant James E. Connelly, Philadelphia, PA, 2. Sergeant Victor Chapman, Lafayette Escadrille, killed 23 June 1916, 2. Sergeant Vernon Booth, Chicago, 2. Sergeant Austin B. Crehaw, Westfield, New York, 1. Lieutenant Willis Harvilland, Minneapolis, Min., 1. Lieutenant Harry Sweet Jones, Hartford, PA, 1. Lieutenant Charles C. Johnson, St. Louis, Mo., 1. Captain Robert L. Rockwell, Cincinnati, Ohio, 1. Lieutenant Stuart Walcott, Washington, killed 14 December 1917, 1. Lieutenant Alan F. Winslow, Rive Forest, Ill., 1. Lieutenant Edgar Tobin, San Antonio, on the 11th of July 1918, 1. Lieutenant Charles T. Merrick, Eldora, Iowa, 1. Lieutenant Alexander O. Craig, New York, in Italy, on 5 July 1918, 1. Lieutenant Sumner Sewell, Bath, Me, above Toul, on 3 June 1918, 1. Lieutenant William J. Hoover, Hartsville, SC, on 2 July 1918, 1. Lieutenant Alfred Grant, Denton, Texas, on 2 July 1918, 1. Lieutenant John MacArthur, Buffalo, NY, on 2 July 1918, 1. Lieutenant Tyler Cook-Brinson, New York, on 1 July 1918, 1. Lieutenant Charles W. Chapman on 8 May 1918. Both he and victim fell in flames, 1. Captain Kenneth Ma, on 15 May 1918, 1. Lieutenant Henry Grendelas, 1. Lieutenant Edward Bufford, Jr., Nashville, 10, on 22 May 1918, 1. Lieutenant William H. Taylor, New York, on 21 May 1918, 1. Ensign Stephen Potter, Boston, Mass., killed 25 April 1918, 1. Lieutenant Walter Avery, Columbus, Ohio, brought down and captured Captain Menkhoff, the German ace, who had 34 victories on 25 July 1918, 1. Citations and decorations of members of the U.S. Army Air Service Distinguished Service Cross Gardner Philip Allen, 1st Lieutenant, C. Flynn Eller. Andrew, 1st Lieutenant. David H. Backus, 1st Lieutenant. Herbert B. Bartholf, 1st Lieutenant. Irwin R. Bleckley, 2nd Lieutenant. Samuel C. Bowman, 2nd Lieutenant. Hugh D. G. Broomfield, 1st Lieutenant. John R. Castleman, 1st Lieutenant. Weir H. Cook, 1st Lieutenant. Hamilton Coolidge, deceased, Captain. Justin P. Follett, 1st Lieutenant. William F. Frank, 1st Lieutenant. Harold E. Goteler, deceased, 2nd Lieutenant. Andre Gundelach, deceased, 1st Lieutenant. D. C. Hunter, 1st Lieutenant. John N. Jeffers, 1st Lieutenant. Samuel K. Jr., 1st Lieutenant. Wilbur E. Kinsley, 2nd Lieutenant. James Knowles, 1st Lieutenant. G. de Vriest Lana, 1st Lieutenant. William O. Lowe, 2nd Lieutenant, USMC Edward Russell Moore, 1st Lieutenant. Edward M. Morris, 2nd Lieutenant. Stephen H. Noyes, Captain. Alfred B. Patterson, Jr., 1st Lieutenant. Britton Polly, 1st Lieutenant. Charles P. Porter, 2nd Lieutenant. Clearton H. Reynolds, Captain. Leslie J. Rummel, 1st Lieutenant. Carl J. Chun, deceased, 1st Lieutenant. Richard B. Shelby, 1st Lieutenant. John Y. Stokes, Jr., 1st Lieutenant. William H. Stovall, First Lieutenant. William H. Vale, First Lieutenant. Pennington H. Way, deceased, Second Lieutenant. Joseph F. Winner, First Lieutenant. Chester E. Wright, First Lieutenant. Legion of Honor, French, Commander, Charles T. Minoha, Major General. William Mitchell, Brigadier General. Croix de Guerre, French, Thomas J. Abernathy, Second Lieutenant. James A. Healy, First Lieutenant. Arthur H. Jones, First Lieutenant. Charles T. Minoha, Major General. Ralph O'Neill, First Lieutenant. Charles P. Porter, Second Lieutenant. Kenneth L. Porter, Second Lieutenant. Joseph C. Rayable, Jr., First Lieutenant. Louis C. Simon, Jr., First Lieutenant. Italian citations: James P. Hanley, Jr., First Lieutenant. George C. Hearing, First Lieutenant. William P. Shelton, First Lieutenant. Norman Sweetser, First Lieutenant. Emma E. Watchorn, First Lieutenant. Frederick K. Weyerhaeuser, First Lieutenant. French citations: Valentine J. Berger, Second Lieutenant. Alexander T. Grier, Second Lieutenant. Horace A. Lake, Second Lieutenant. Cruz El Merito de Iguera, Italian James L. Ball, First Lieutenant. Raymond P. Baldwin, First Lieutenant. Arthur M. Beach, First Lieutenant. Alan W. Bevan, First Lieutenant. Gilbert P. Bogart, First Lieutenant. Arthur F. Clement, First Lieutenant. William G. Cochran, First Lieutenant. DeWitt Coleman, Jr., First Lieutenant. Kenneth G. Collins, First Lieutenant. Alexander M. Craig, First Lieutenant. Herbert C. Dobbs, Jr., First Lieutenant. Edmund O'Donovan, First Lieutenant. Norton Downs, Jr., First Lieutenant. Arthur D. Farquhar, First Lieutenant. Harry S. Kincaster ed., First Lieutenant. Willis S. Fitch, First Lieutenant. Donald G. Frost, First Lieutenant. William O. Frost, First Lieutenant. James P. Hanley, Jr., First Lieutenant. Spencer L. Hart, Second Lieutenant. George C. Hearing, First Lieutenant. Wallace Hodgson, First Lieutenant. Goster Johnson, First Lieutenant. James Kennedy, Second Lieutenant. Leroy D. Kiley, First Lieutenant. Herman F. Croiger, First Lieutenant. Fiorello H. LaGuardia, Major. Patton McGilvery, First Lieutenant. Abel Mitchell, First Lieutenant. William H. Pottoff, First Lieutenant. Aubrey G. Russell, First Lieutenant. William B. Shelton, First Lieutenant. Norman Sweetser, First Lieutenant. Norman Terry, Second Lieutenant. Emma E. Watchorn, First Lieutenant. Frederick K. Weyerhaeuser, First Lieutenant. Warren Wheeler, First Lieutenant. Alfred S. R. Wilson, First Lieutenant. Warren S. Wilson, First Lieutenant. Report of the Director of Military Aeronautics, War Department, Office of the Director of Military Aeronautics, 3 November, 1918. Sir, I have the honor to submit herewith the annual report of the Division of Military Aeronautics for the fiscal year ended 30th June, 1918. Though the Division of Military Aeronautics was created only on 24th April, 1917, it was agreed that the duties entrusted to it and previously carried out by the Signal Corps should be covered in this report in order to present a continuous story of the development of the personnel, training, and organizing phases of the present air service. Also, it should be pointed out that operations on the front in France have been left largely to whatever report the American Expeditionary Force may deem wise. The fiscal year 1917-18 saw aviation develop from a wholly subsidiary branch of the Army as the aviation section of the Signal Corps to a position of extreme and decisive importance as the Air Service, directly under the Chief of Staff. From the most insignificant beginnings, it came within the year to be one of America's major efforts in the war. This is all the more surprising when America's previous backwardness in aviation is considered. This country has stood practically still in aerial progress, while the war in Europe brought about an extraordinary advance. From all this, the United States was entirely shut off up to the time it abandoned neutrality. So little exact knowledge was available that the first American planes to go with the expedition into Mexico in March, 1916, were all rendered useless in accidents within a short time of arrival. There was practically no aviation technique here comparable to Europe's, almost negligible manufacturing facilities, not 100 trained flyers, and only the most rudimentary facilities for training. Moreover, no one had any adequate appreciation of the intricacy and skill required in the making of either an aeroplane or the training of a pilot. As against this stagnation, Europe's progress in 2.5 years of war had been tremendous. The first planes to go to the front in 1914 had been few in number, unequipped with radio, machine guns, bombs, or photographic apparatus, and entirely unproved in military value. Their extraordinary success, however, in disclosing the size of the German concentration in Belgium at once brought them into a position of great importance. Very shortly, radio was installed to replace signaling by dropping tinsel or making curious evolutions. The pistols of the pilots gave way to machine guns. The easygoing system of dropping bombs over the side was replaced by regular bombing planes, and the occasional taking of photographs by an intricate system of picturing every mile of the front. Engine power increased to 200, 300, 400, 500 horsepower. Huge planes with large carrying capacity were being developed for night bombing, and operations were taking place by whole squadrons in various air strata, light, single-seater scouts around 15,000 to 20,000 feet, two-seater day bombers around 9,000 feet, and photographic and observation planes around 6,000 feet. In contrast to all this development, the United States at the time of its entry into the war stood very little ahead of where it had been before the World War broke out. Aviation, both in its personnel and its equipment, was included in that part of the Signal Corps known as the Aviation Section, which had been established by Congress the 18th of July, 1914. Its chief was Major General George O. Skier, who after 4 years as military attaché in London, had been put in charge of the Aviation Section in May, 1916, and made Chief Signal Officer on the 14th of February, 1917, continuing to have charge of aviation through nearly the whole of the fiscal year. On the 6th of April, 1917, the total assets on hand consisted of 65 officers, 1,120 men, 2 small flying fields, less than 300 very second-rate training planes, practically no manufacturing facilities, and only the most meager technical information as to Europe's startling developments. The original American war program, based on an army of 1 million men, made aviation but a relatively insignificant part of the general military forces. This program, which represented the view of the General Staff before the arrival of the foreign missions, was met by 2 appropriations, $10,800,000 on the 12th of May, 1917, and $43,450,000 on the 15th of June, many times larger than any appropriations ever before made. The British and French missions, however, arriving the last part of April, completely revolutionized this viewpoint. Supported by an urgent cable of the 24th of May from the Premier of France, calling for 2,000 planes a month and a total of 5,000 pilots and 50,000 mechanicians, the $640 million appropriation, the largest ever made by Congress for one specific purpose, was drawn up, put through the House of Representatives Military Affairs Committee in 2 meetings, the House itself in 1, the Senate Military Affairs Committee in 45 minutes, and the Senate itself a week later, becoming law on the 24th of July, 1917. On this date the present large program was really launched, 2 months and a half after the outbreak of war, and largely in response to Allied appeals. The rest of the fiscal year was taken up in amplifying and executing the lines of effort here laid down. Toward the end of the year, however, it became obvious that the system of organization of an aviation section as a subsidiary branch of the Signal Corps was not functioning efficiently. The British and French, perceiving that we were encountering the same kind of obstacles as theirs, strongly recommended a separate, independent air service similar to the air ministries they had been obliged to establish and which have worked so successfully since. As a result, a first step was taken in a rearrangement of duties designed to effect a greater independence and a greater concentration of authority when, on the 24th of April, the War Department authorized the following statement: Mr. John D. Ryan has accepted the directorship of aircraft production for the Army. A reorganization of the aviation section of the Signal Corps has been also effected, of which the principal elements are as follows: General Skier, as Chief Signal Officer, will devote his attention to the administration of signals. A division of military aeronautics is created, under the direction of Brig. General William L. Kenly. The Aircraft Board, created by Act of Congress, remains as an advisory body, as it has been in the past, with Mr. Ryan as its chairman. This arrangement is made with the entire concurrence of Mr. Howard Coffin, who remains a member of the Advisory Commission of the Council of National Defense and will render assistance and counsel to the Aircraft Board and Mr. Ryan. The Division of Military Aeronautics will have control of the training of aviators and military use of aircraft. The exact division of functions in the matter of designing and engineering will be worked out as experience determines between the Division of Military Aeronautics and the Division of Production. This announcement involves no change of personnel in the present Equipment Division of the Signal Corps, of which W.C. Potter is chief, and which will continue under his direction. This reorganization, however, was admittedly but the first step. The first action taken by the President under the broad powers of the Overman Act was to effect a still further reorganization by taking aviation entirely out of the jurisdiction of the Signal Corps, where it has been from its inception on the 18th of July, 1914. And to set up two separate bureaus, one for securing and training the large flying and ground forces, and the other for providing planes, engines, and equipment. The Presidential Order of the 21st of May covering this change follows, by virtue of the authority in me vested as Commander-in-Chief of the Army and by virtue of further authority upon me specifically conferred by an act authorizing the President to coordinate or consolidate executive bureaus, agencies, and offices, and for other purposes, in the interest of economy and the more efficient concentration of the government approved the 20th of May, 1918, I do hereby make and publish the following order. The powers heretofore conferred by law or by executive order upon and the duties and functions heretofore performed by the Chief Signal Officer of the Army are hereby redistributed as follows. 1. The Chief Signal Officer of the Army shall have charge, under the direction of the Secretary of War, of all military signal duties, and of books, papers and devices connected therewith, including telegraph and telephone apparatus and the necessary meteorological instruments for use on target ranges, and other military uses. The construction, repair, and operation of military telegraph lines, and the duty of collecting and transmitting information for the Army by telegraph or otherwise, and all other duties usually pertaining to military signaling, and shall perform such other duties as now or are or shall hereafter be devolved by law or by executive order upon said Chief Signal Officer which are not connected with the aviation section of the Signal Corps or with the purchase, manufacture, maintenance, and production of aircraft, and which are not hereinafter conferred, in special or general terms, upon other officers or agencies. 2. A Director of Military Aeronautics, selected and designated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Army, shall hereafter have charge, under the direction of the Secretary of War, of the aviation section of the Signal Corps of the Army, and as such shall be, and he hereby is, charged with the duty of operating and maintaining or supervising the operation and maintenance of all military aircraft, including balloons and aeroplanes, all appliances pertaining to said aircraft and signaling apparatus of any kind when installed on said aircraft, and of training officers, enlisted men, and candidates for aviation service in matters pertaining to military aviation, and shall hereafter perform each and every function heretofore imposed upon and performed by the Chief Signal Officer of the Army in, or in connection with, the aviation section of the Signal Corps, except such as pertains to the purchase, manufacture, and production of aircraft and aircraft equipment, and as is not hereinafter conferred, in special or general terms, upon the Bureau of Aircraft Production, and all aeroplanes now in use or completed and on hand, and all material and parts, and all machinery, tools, appliances, and equipment held for use for the maintenance thereof, all lands, buildings, repair shops, warehouses, and all other property, real, personal, or mixed, heretofore used by the Signal Corps in, or in connection with, the operation and maintenance of aircraft and the training of officers, enlisted men, and candidates for aviation service, or procured and now held for such use by or under the jurisdiction and control of the Signal Corps of the Army, all books, records, files and office equipment heretofore used by the Signal Corps, in, or in connection with, such operation, maintenance, and training, and the entire personnel of the Signal Corps as at present assigned to, or engaged upon work in, or in connection with, such operation, maintenance, and training, is hereby transferred from the jurisdiction of the Chief Signal Office and placed under the jurisdiction of the Director of Military Aeronautics, it being the intent hereof to transfer from the jurisdiction of the Chief Signal Officer to the jurisdiction of the said Director of Military Aeronautics every function, power, and duty conferred and imposed upon said Director of Military Aeronautics by subparagraph 2 of paragraph I hereof, all property of every sort of nature used or procured for use in, or in connection with, the functions of the aviation section of the Signal Corps placed in charge of the Director of Military Aeronautics by subparagraph 2 of paragraph I hereof, and the entire personnel of the Signal Corps in charge of the Director of Military Aeronautics by subparagraph 2 of paragraph I hereof. 3. An executive agency, known as the Bureau of Aircraft Production, is